Tonight's class is going to be about garden pests, diseases, and weeds. We combined all three of these into one class to kind of give an overview because a lot of what you're going to be doing to combating all these things, especially what we call a holistic approach, where you just it's kind of it's going to be helping. You're going to be focusing on making a healthy garden that's going to automatically be fighting all three of these things as well. But we're going to kind of dive, not too deeply, but definitely going to make you familiar with most of the common pests and diseases and weeds, and talk a little bit about, treatments and things like that, and preventions. And yeah, there's a lot of slides tonight, but most of them are just going to be photos. We're just going to be, it's more just to make you familiar with things to look out for as you're working the garden. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So we divide this class in three sections: garden pests, garden diseases, and garden weeds. So we'll start out with pests. So lots of different garden pests. We talked about a bunch already. Some of these slides have been in previous classes, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper and then talk about how do we actually, deal with them. So I've divided the pests into spring and summer pests. That doesn't mean you won't see these, the spring ones will kind of stay all year sometimes. Sometimes but it's more about when they emerge in the spring, and the other ones emerge in the summer, but sometimes you'll have all different kinds throughout the year. But these are the main ones that are going to be coming out. And I'll just tell you that the two main ones that drive us crazy are the cabbage looper in the spring and the harlequin beetle in the summer. So those are definitely the two, but we'll that we kind of deal the most with. But we'll talk about all different kinds. But we'll start with cabbage looper. If you have a garden right now and you're working your garden, you probably noticed this white moth. It's like a normal moth size. And it's completely white and it's flying all over your garden. That is the cabbage looper moth. So that guy is planting little eggs all over, mainly your collards, especially, and your cabbages. Those are the two main things that they love to eat. But they will go on to other things too, like kale and stuff. But it doesn't cause as much damage than like its collards is the main thing that they'll go after. And cabbage as well, but they'll lay the eggs, and then you'll have these little green inchworms, and they just do all kinds of damage to your collards. I mean, they're munchers, so they just, they chew, they'll have giant holes all over them, and then those and which you can still eat it, it's fine, that leaf. But what's going to happen is it's going to start browning and rotting, and then it's going to attract even more pests and diseases and stuff. So a lot of times when you get a lot of damage like this, you just want to rip that out. And starting new. But basically, yeah. I mean, but if you're on top, the easiest way to deal with these cabbage loopers is just walk your garden like every day, every other day, and look at they mainly hide on the bottom of the leaf. They'll be on the top sometimes, but they're mostly on the bottom of like of collard leaves and cabbages leaves, and some, like I said, sometimes kale. So if you just kind of, do a quick look under each leaf, like I said, like maybe, every other day or so, and you see these guys, the green guys, you can squish them. They're really easy to squish if you're squeamish about squishing bugs. You can you can, get some soapy water, and you kind of knock them into the soapy water, and that'll take care of them. But definitely, if you're squeamish, yeah, gardening is a bug squishing activity. So yeah, definitely the best way to, handle these is to check them, frequently. There's also some sprays. We'll talk about some sprays elsewhere. What's one called BT? This is organic bacterial spray that it basically eats, the bacteria eats these guys, and takes them out pretty well. And then you can also do, like, pest covers and things like that, if you want to prevent them from even landing on your crops. So that's what we're doing right now at our farms. We actually have pest covers, which is like a really lightweight fabric, that allows, that we put over, and we've made some hoops, and we put over our, basically, our collards and the cabbage, because that's the ones that they really tear up. But I mean, if you only have a couple collards, I mean, we have hundreds of collards. That's why I mean, it's just too much to, keep up with, especially over the summer. But we're going to try out the pest covers. Yeah, the cabbage looper is definitely a tough one if you're growing greens and spring crops. But then the other ones, like slugs, you'll often get slugs. Again, they bite things, so they'll see chewing. So if you see these holes, you see something that's chewing on it, and you can't figure out what's chewing. You can come out at night with a headlamp, and you can identify them. They don't like the light. Beer traps work really well, or like going out at night with a headlamp and just squishing them. Sometimes you put like a flat rock in your garden. They'll hang out underneath the flat rock during the day because it's cool, and you flip it over and squish them. So aphids, these guys are sap suckers. They're really small little guys that pull the sugars out of the stalk, and then they poop out sugar water. That makes your leaf kind of shiny. So they don't do too much damage, but a lot of them will, start to hurt your plants. You could do anything from like soap water works really well. We'll talk about soap water spray that actually, because there's like hard body insects and soft body insects, like slugs and loopers and worms and aphids are soft body. So spraying things like neem oil, which comes from a tree in India, or like soap water or things like that will usually kill them. Or you can even just like you can squish them really easy, or spray a high pressure hose will spray them all off. If it looks like your leaf got shot by a buckshot shotgun, these are actually flea beetles. So these are super small little fleas that will take, start eating on your leaves. They seem to love eggplant, especially. That's why I'll usually grow my eggplants to be a little bit extra big before I plant them out, because they usually don't do that much damage. I mean, if it's a small seedling, they love seedlings. If it's a small seedling, they could kill it or stunt it. But if it's like a large seedling, it's not that big of a deal. But like neem oil works really well on flea beetles. And then if you ever see this crazy looking pattern, that's actually what's called a leaf miner. So it's a little bug. It gets in between the layers of the leaf and just starts eating the insides and carving out passageways. And looks really cool. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage. Eventually, that leaf will brown and start rotting. It's not a big deal if it's like on like a bean plant or something. But if I'll see this a lot on chard, and plants like that. So if you do want to eat it, you can still eat it. But yeah, I normally the best thing to do with this is just pull the leaf off and throw it in the trash. Don't compost it, because you want that guy to get out of your garden. And then you have the summer stuff, which are more of the you'll see a lot more hard shell. So again, like the soft body stuff are your aphids and loopers and slugs and stuff, and the hard shell are like your harlequin beetles, and like the Japanese beetles and squash bugs and stuff. So harlequin beetles, this is, in my opinion, the worst. Yeah, the cabbage looper is the worst in the spring, and then the harlequin beetle is like one of the worst in the summer, especially if you're going to grow your crops all summer long, like your cool weather stuff, like kale and collards and chard and stuff. A lot of harlequin beetles I mean, they come out in the forest in the summer, and they love greens. The best thing to do with these guys is try to find, every other day, look at underneath all the leaves of your plants, and try to find their eggs. Their eggs are, they're crazy. They're like these perfect symmetrical, like, and they look like mini striped kegs. So if you could find the eggs, then problem solved. Just squish them up in your hands. Or then if you could find them as when they just emerge, they're really easy to squish. Or as an actual bug, it's a little bit more to squish. I like to wear gloves when I squish these guys, or you can knock them in soapy water. But they will do a bunch of damage. They usually, like, they don't often kill the plants, but they'll do a lot of damage, especially on your leafy greens, which you don't want to really eat the leafy greens after that. I mean, you can, it's just not tasty. Cucumber beetles are awful as well. They don't do much damage. They chew a little bit. They look like ladybugs, but they're yellow. So if you ever see a yellow ladybug, you want to squish them, because like I said, they don't do that much damage. They just chew a little bit, but they actually have all these like bacterials and blights in their stomach, and it could actually infect. If you ever have a giant cucumber plant and all of a sudden and the whole thing dies, you might have had, it might be because a cucumber beetle was chewing on it and infected it with the blights in the stomach. So you definitely want to keep an eye out for that. And if you see one, spend a couple minutes chasing them and squishing them, because it's worth it. Now, if you know you have a problem with cucumber beetles, a lot of times people will use pest covers and stuff to prevent it. But for the most part, I mean, they don't do too much damage, or at least they haven't in places I've seen. But like I said, if you have a lot of times you learn what your problem bug is going to be the year, the first year, and then the next year you could decide what kind of like prevention methods you want to use. Japanese beetles could be kind of they don't do too much damage on vegetables that I've noticed. They more attack our fruit trees, but they're not out very long. There's a whole growth cycle. They grow in these like white grubs. If you ever dig in a hole and you see a white grub, there's only two types of white grubs in our area. One is a pest for turf, so you might as well squish them anyways. And then another one is Japanese beetle. So if you're digging a hole and you see these white grubs, you could squish them or just throw them in your yard and something will eat them. But Japanese beetles, yeah. So I've noticed most of the damage I've had is been they skeletonize our leaves on our fruit trees, and they don't kill them, but they definitely stunt them. So I'll use this what's called kaolin clay sprays, this clay spray that I'll talk about in a second, and they hate it. So if you spray whatever they're eating with a spray, they don't even want to touch it, so they'll fly away, and it's pretty easy to take care of. White flies, if it ever looks like there's a bunch of white mold on your leaf and you touch it and half of it flies away, that's white flies. Again, like neem oil, high pressure water sprays, things like that will take care of them. Tomato hornworm. This is pretty hard to miss. If you're checking your tomatoes out, like once a week, you'll see them. It's giant, worm that just devours your tomatoes. So if you see one, you want to definitely squish them as soon as possible. Or I'm going to show you later. There's these like it's a parasitic wasp that'll lay eggs into it. And if you see these white egg sacs, you want to don't squish them because that guy's going to die real soon. And then all these new parasitic wasps are going to come out and they're going to eat the rest of your tomato hornworms. Squash bugs, eat all kinds of different things. And the easiest way is to, again, try to find these little orange, eggs on the bottom of the leaves. If you just like, I mean, at the very least, once a week, walk through your garden and look under, like, most of the leaves and stuff. You'll find eggs, and they're pretty easy to identify. And yeah, it's the easiest way to get them. And then then the normal bugs, squish them or push them in soapy water. The squash vine borer is a terrible one. If you had a giant, like let's say you're growing like acorn squash and it's vining all over the place, and all of a sudden a whole stalk just dies. That's probably you have a squash border. So you want to pick up that stalk and follow it to the base. And if you see these little holes in the base, that means you got one of these worms that fly laid these eggs in the soil. Then they I think I have a picture of the fly later, and the eggs, and then these little maggots crawled in and they chewed their way into squash stems are hollow, so they chew their way into the squash stem, and then they just like are eating their way through the stem until they kill the plant. So if you discover this before the plant dies, one thing to do is you want to get like a box cutter, a really sharp knife, and you want to do some surgery. And you may kill your plant doing this, but it's definitely going to die if it's got one of these squash borers. So might as well try. So get a box cutter. If there's 3 holes, that means you got 3 maggots in there or whatever. Or if it's one, it's just one larvae. So you want to take a box cutter and cut open the stems until you find the larvae, and then squish them. And then, like I said, if there's 3 holes, you keep on cutting until you find 3 of them, squish them, and then you want to get a bunch of wet garden soil, and just bury all the giant hole that you just made in the squash plant, and hope that it ends up becoming a root ball. If it heals and becomes a root ball, then your squash is going to survive, but there's a good chance. It's like 50-50. There's a good chance it's not going to survive. But one way to prevent these guys, they say, is if you know if you have squash bugs in the area, is to like wrap the bases of your squash plants with tinfoil. I've never tried it, but I've heard people, has, moderate success with that. Another better way is using like pest covers. If you know you have a problem with squash vine borers, you may want to think next year to cover your squash with pest covers, at least to get it, until get it going, because I think they come out, in May and June, and then like I don't think they come in the summer. I think they mainly lay their eggs in the beginning of the summer. But if you can make it through that, and then yeah, if you can get your squash plant, larger, and then you can take the pest covers off, to get pollination and stuff. All right, yeah. Yeah, definitely some disgusting guys, and disgusting insects for sure. All right, so treatments. So there's, like I said, the best thing to do, the most organic thing to do is just like, walk at least once or twice a week, walk through your garden, look at, the top and bottom of the leaves, and just squish or drown things in soapy water. Um, and then there's other things, there's lots of different things you could do. I just listed a couple of common things. If you're going organic, I'm not really going to get into non-organic sprays, like when you need to have a license for that, and two, most of like DPR gardens banned. We ban anything that's not organic, so you can't even use them at a lot of these gardens. But some of the most common, like I feel like neem oil is like one of the most common organic garden, of sprays. It's basically this oil made from a neem tree. You want to find like pure neem oil. A lot of times it's cut with different insecticides and fungicides, which, maybe you want that, if you're having a real bad problem, but just be aware. And then it works. It's not only like pesticide, but it's also a fungicide. And we're gonna talk about this one with a lot of the diseases and things. But it'll take mostly soft body stuff, aphids, white flies, moths, things like that, spider mites. It will. I don't think it kills Japanese beetles, but it will definitely, in the hard shell things. But it will deter them. Like they don't like the smell, so they won't. But it's also great for all kinds of like, mildews, powdery mildews, and rusts and blights and things as well. It's a pretty great spray. Sometimes you need to mix it with like a lot of people, with like dishwasher soap and stuff. If it's a particular concentrate to I always forget that word. Like it's to kind of help break up. If you're mixing the oily concentrate with water, you need I always forget the name of it, but it needs to like to help kind of break it up into the water. Most time people don't use that, but just read the instructions if you need something to kind of but or you can just buy the spray that's already pre-mixed, and you're good to go. The other one, BT, Bacillus, cannot pronounce that word. It's an organic bacteria that they spray on for caterpillars. So it kills mainly caterpillars. It just eats them up alive, and then so we use it mainly for cabbage loopers. But you want to just use it for cabbage loopers because there are beneficial, uh, um, caterpillars and stuff too as well. So you don't just want blanket spray. You want to just spray it on your whatever your cabbage looper is eating. This is that kaolin spray. So this is that clay spray I was talking about. It's completely organic, and you can actually eat it. We'll talk a lot about it in our fruit tree class, because this is like the main thing organic spray people use in fruit orchards, or one of the main ones. And you spray, like the Japanese beetles are eating everything. You spray it, and it looks like it's just covered in powdered sugar. It still allows sunlight and everything to come in. You may have to reapply if it rains really heavily, but basically any bug hates it. They'll land on it and then fly right away. So and that will protect your crops. I've used it on fruit trees, never used it on vegetables, but I'm sure you can. And then there's a whole bunch of DIY sprays, garlic sprays, hot pepper sprays, baking soda, tomato sprays, peppermint oils, all different kinds of things. I'm going to show you a quick video, next slide, on some of those. They're just, the main thing you want to do when you're making your own sprays is to test a spray out. Don't just, because it can be different for different plants and different seasons. Different parts of the seasons, they soak up different temperatures wise. It can have different reactions. So whenever you're making a DIY spray, you always want to do a test spray. Just spray one little plant or one part of one plant, and then come back in a day or two. If it looks fine, then go ahead and spray your whole garden. But one of the main ones that a lot of people use is soap water. So soap is actually really great at killing soft body things like aphids. I like to use organic soap. I love like Dr. Bronner's Castile soap, especially the peppermint, because the peppermint, like bugs hate peppermint too, so it's like, two in one. But you can use, most different kinds of soaps for that. And then one of the best things to do is to attract beneficial bugs, like planting. And we talked about like plant. This is why you plant lots of different kinds of native flowering and herbs and things like that. That's going to attract, ladybugs and all these other bugs that are going to eat your bad bugs. So that's definitely great. And then, we talked about like beer traps and things like that are great for slugs. They work, put some beer in a dish and leave it out for a couple days. It'll be, all your slugs in your garden will be, drowned in it. And then trap crops are a little tricky. So if there's certain things like I've noticed that harlequin beetles love sunflowers, so we'll plant some sunflowers a little bit away from the garden, and then we'll go out and do lots of squish. The first thing I'll do is go straight to that sunflower and squish all the harlequin beetles. So it's an easy way to kind of squish them before they get to the crops that you really want. But it's a little tricky because sometimes it could attract bugs and stuff, bad pests and stuff. So yeah, definitely read up on trap crops a little bit before trying it out. So we're play this quick video on a couple DIY garden sprays. All right. So there was a question. So it doesn't harm the plants at all. So this is what I love about these like organic sprays is for the most part. I mean, you don't have to worry about them harming the plants. This is what also why, but with the DIY ones, that's why you want to do a test crop, because sometimes if you mix it wrong, or if it's just like there's a different factor or something, you could. I definitely have fried some plants. I think maybe I use like too much baking soda or something like that, and kind of harm the plants a little bit. So DIY, you want to be a little careful, do a test one, and then come back the next day. But then other ones, I mean, like the kaolin spray, BT, neem oil, none of these are going to harm your plants. Sometimes you don't want to spray on like the fruits. You want to just kind of focus on the leaves. Some sprays may, it could hurt the fruits, but I've definitely sprayed all these sprays on the entire crops and haven't had any bad reactions. But it might be something if you have full tomatoes, maybe yeah, I don't know. I maybe just research your DIY sprays first, but all the other stuff should be good. So another question? What's your Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap to water formula ratio? I've never actually mixed it, but I believe it's like half, and it's like 1 to 1. I'm pretty sure. I definitely Google that though, just to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's like a 1 to 1 mixture. But just in case, Google it and let me know if that's wrong. And then, like I said, I've never actually used soap water, but I know lots of people have, and I'm actually going to try it out this year. And then sprayers, if you got a small garden, you can't beat, a couple dollar hand sprayer. Get a funnel if you don't want to get messy. And then you have different sprayers, like ones you can attach to the hose, and then a little bit comes out and then mixes itself. You can have hand crank ones. This one's probably getting like $20, $30. And then you have a large area, you definitely want a backpack sprayer. So we have some backpack sprayers on our farms. Those could be like $40 or $50, but it will save you, a lot of time. So another question, would you say neem is the most effective one for almost all pests? I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, I'm definitely not the person to ask for, but I mean, neem, it definitely advertises itself. That is the most effective for most pests. And I use it generally like when I don't know what what to use. I always try neem at first. Um, but like I said, I'm not an expert at these sprays and pests and stuff, so I don't know what would be the overall. I mean, a lot of this stuff is very focused. Like BT, you only use for cabbage loopers. Kalen spray. Mainly you're going to be using it for like Japanese beetles and things like that. So, I would say yeah, neem oil is like the most general one I know. Oh, is that you said 5 TB to 1 gallon? Is that the ratio for the soap water? Five tablespoons to 1 gallon. Okay, so I was like way off. So thank you for researching that. So yeah. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, first, like I said, I've never done a soap water. I thought I read somewhere it was like a 1 to 1, but definitely not 1 to 1. Thanks for that correction. So it's that, yeah. So squash borer, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I already, kind of explained it somewhat, but here's some pictures of it. Like you said, if you ever see a big section of your squash, all of a sudden look like this. Check the base. If there's holes, grab a sharp knife, start, doing some surgery, open up, until you find the larva, squish them, then bury the wound with like some really wet, good soil, and then hopefully that will grow, into some roots. And this is what the fly looks like. I've never actually seen the fly out and about. You could definitely you could probably research when that fly is around in this area and put pest covers up if you've had issues. Because that's the thing. A lot of times pests. I mean, once they find a good spot, they'll keep on coming back to that spot. And which is why we do crop rotations. But even that can may not confuse them. But this is an example of like some people will wrap aluminum foil on the base to kind of prevent them from laying eggs. But row covers as well, pest covers work really well, uh, when you're planting the seedlings there. All right, and let's talk about prevention. So this is crazy. So aphids, so ants actually farm aphids. So aphids, they're sap suckers. They suck up the sugars from the plant, and then they poop out these like little droplets of sugar water that ants love, and ants will actually farm them and protect them, and then aphids love to eat. Or ladybugs love to eat aphids, and they'll actually fight each other for that. It's pretty crazy. Um, but prevention. So the best thing to do, if you don't want to, like, if you're into all, researching every little bug and pest and disease, great. But if you, what most people do is they just do a general holistic approach. They just try to make the most healthy garden as possible. So there's different practices like, if you can do drip irrigation and things like that, try to water the soil, not the plant so much. Because yeah, especially I mean, if all you have is a hose, that's fine. But if possible, focus the water on more on the soil and less on the plant, because then that's going to get some fungal issues, and it's going to make your plants a little less healthy, which attracts pests to definitely look for the less healthy plants to attack first. Definitely building up like healthy biology. Adding compost every year. Healthy compost. Compost tea, things like that. Avoiding like your miracle grows and your really unhealthy and organic fertilizers that will cause just bad growth, and cause your plants to be a little less healthy. So building up good soil, ensuring that soil has good drainage. If your area is flooding a lot, you're going to have a lot of issues. Your plants aren't going to do well, and then you're going to have pests and diseases coming after them. Selecting the best varieties, doing crop rotation, not just planting all of one thing, but planting a diverse group of plants. um, and then like learning, looking, if you have issues with certain diseases or pests, researching the disease resistant varieties or the pest resistant varieties, and planting those, making sure you plant a quarter of your garden with flowers and herbs, so you're building an ecosystem, so like ladybugs and all these other great beneficial insects that we're going to talk about are going to come and hang out, drink your nectar, and then all of a sudden they're going to look over and see aphids and they're going to eat them all for you. So that's the best thing you could do with pest control. Proper spacing, don't crowd things too much, or you're gonna have weaker plants and unhealthy plants. And trying to prune, getting things off the ground as much as possible. Trellises, prune your tomatoes, get circulation into your garden. Mulch helps a lot as well. Not only does it help from a lot of diseases are in the soil, like a lot of tomato diseases and stuff. So when it rains, it splashes all that soil up, and then you got all kinds of blights on your tomatoes. So having mulch, keeping that from happen, is really great as well, and it'll also decrease your weeds and maintain proper moistures, which is all great for having a healthier garden. It's just spending some time, doing walks and checking for things, and like, and when you notice like there's issues, responding to it, like cutting out diseased parts of your plants, and removing, anything that's dead or diseased or dying, and then squishing bugs, and not letting fruit fall on the ground and rot, and that's going to attract all kinds of, pests as well. So we're going to talk a lot about this, but like I said, like, if you don't want to respond, with a perfect solution for every possible thing that could go wrong, just doing, just making your garden as healthy as possible is going to prevent a lot of this stuff from happening. And then row covers, also, we talked a lot about this already, but row covers, doing a floating row cover with some rocks, or doing hoops as well. You can get the summer pest covers if you're doing summer stuff, or there's winter stuff if you're overwintering. But that, pest covers helps a lot. Crop rotation as well. I mean, when the bugs, certain bugs or pests are going to be like, when they find those tomatoes, they're going to think that, they're going to lay their eggs knowing that, those tomatoes are going to come back, next year. And so if you move those tomatoes around your garden every year, you're not going to, hope is you're going to, be one step ahead of them. So doing crop rotation, keeping, everything in one family, keeping, like, especially brassicas, like your kales and collards and stuff, keep them in one area, and so you can concentrate on dealing with that, their pests in one group, instead of have spreading them all over a garden, and then having to spend, the whole, all day trying to, squish every single bug that's attacking your brassicas. So keeping them in the vegetable families, and then rotating those families works well. um, there's a lot of great companion plants that can kind of help as well. There's certain things that will actually deter some pests, like planting chives and garlic. This is one of the reasons why I like planting garlic as a border crop, planting it around your garden. It will actually, there's certain pests that hate the smell of garlic and chives in general, alliums and onions and stuff, and will, that alone will keep them from coming. Nasturtiums are supposed to keep away, like, white moths and white flies, and borers, tansies are supposed to, be effective against Japanese beetles. So there's a huge list of different plants that repel different things, and on Wikipedia if you want to check that out. And then, as we keep on saying this, but I've shown this slide. A lot of these slides are going to be repeat, and we're just going to breeze through them. But making, just planting A quarter of your garden at least should be flowers and herbs. The more native or at least non-invasive, the better. And then that's going to create an ecosystem that's going to attract, lots of great bugs, good bugs that are going to attack your bad bugs. And that's why we don't use pesticides, because even though, or we don't recommend using like general pesticides like inorganic ones, because that kills everything, your bad bugs and your good bugs, and then the bad bugs are probably going to come back quicker, and then you're not going to have any ladybugs left to fight them. All right, so beneficials, this is my favorite part. So let's talk about all the good bugs that you want. And so aphid killers. So the main one is the ladybug. I've never actually seen an aphid midge or a hoverfly. I'm sure they're out there, and they're really good at eating aphids. But the main one you're going to see is the ladybug. And so I did the whole ladybug cycle, because I mean, everyone's familiar with what a general ladybug looks like, but adult ones. But really, the adults are good, but like one of the best ones are the larva version, or like they're kind of like I call them the high school version, because it starts out, eggs. So you definitely want to keep an eye out for these types of eggs, the yellow kind of. Don't squish these. They kind of they look a little bit like the squash bug eggs. The squash bug eggs tend to be more orange and more round, but definitely keep an eye out. If you see these oval looking yellow ones, leave them be. And they come out these little. I've never actually seen these little guys, but then I've seen a lot of the larva stage, and that's when they're the most ferocious against aphids. I mean, I've heard like crazy statistics that they eat like hundreds of aphids a day. These guys, and then as adult, they'll still eat some aphids, but they'll also drink, hang out and drink nectar, and then produce more ladybugs for you as well. So, but you really want to get to know this guy, because this is the one that's going to eat most of your aphids. I actually have a video. I pulled this from a Facebook Live. This is the Edgewood rooftop farm, and we noticed one day. I mean, all of a sudden we just were covered in aphids, all of our tomatoes. But then at the same time, we were getting ready to spray neem, but we saw that there was also tons of ladybugs and tons of in different forms, and then we kind of just let it go, and the ladybugs end up winning. I mean, we didn't have to spray or anything like that. But okay, I want to show you. So these are our tomatoes. Give you a long. We have a whole row of tomatoes here. And these tomatoes are covered in what we call aphids, little sapsuckers. They do some damage. They usually don't kill a plant unless it's a small plant, but they can, they're last little guys. You can hand squish them too if you like. You can spray them with water. There's a lot of different ways to kind of get rid of them. Neem works really well, but one great way to get rid of them is just kind of build an ecosystem and attract beneficial insects. So these are some of the beneficial insects that will actually eat a whole bunch of aphids. So that's, everyone probably knows that's a ladybug, the little red guy down here. But this guy right here, a lot of people maybe not know him. He's actually like, he's basically, I forget what face they call it, but he's like a teenager ladybug. And these guys are ferocious aphid eaters. They will eat hundreds of aphids a year. So instead of us spraying this whole thing and maybe even killing or chasing away these ladybugs, we're just going to let the ladybugs do their work. So they're we're going to just let them hang out, and you can see all these aphids right here that are just munching on. And we have a lot of aphids right now in these tomatoes, but we also have dozens of ladybugs in those crazy teenager ladybugs that eat like crazy. So we're just going to let this kind of be for now and see if the ladybugs can actually eat enough aphids so it doesn't affect our tomatoes. Sorry for the poor camera. Yeah. But yeah, we actually like within like a week, the ladybugs had eaten not all of them. There were still some aphids, but there was like a nice balance where the aphids weren't actually damaging the tomatoes, and it was pretty great. But those were also fully mature tomatoes. Like if you see a bunch of aphids on some baby plants, you may want to go ahead and spray or hand squish them, because they can't, they're more, tender. But like fully mature plants can, yeah. I mean, I definitely would let, as long as you can identify some beneficial insects, I would let them just do their job. And then you have what we call general killers. So these things are insects that eat just about anything, but they definitely eat a lot of your pests, bugs. So definitely one of the cooler ones is the assassin bug. Damsel bug. I've never actually seen these, but definitely heard they're around. The attackman flies. Just yeah, they eat just about any kind of bug, but mostly they'll eat your pests. One of the best pests or best beneficials that people like in greenhouse productions will actually order is the lacewing. Lacewing adult, this is the lacewing fly, and it actually, I think it's one of those things. It doesn't eat pests. I think it's one of those things where they actually don't eat. But it'll lay eggs, and if you ever see a leaf with these types of eggs on hanging on a string, definitely leave that because those are the best predators ever. And then the larva comes out in this vicious looking thing, and then he just eats everything in the area. And it's fantastic. So if you ever see these eggs like that, definitely leave it. And then the last thing, the praying mantis. So this is you need to be there are actually one native praying mantis, which is great. It does really great work eating lots of pests. And then there's tons of really bad invasive praying mantis that you really want to be aware of, because those some of them are pretty vicious. Some of them will eat hummingbirds. Like if you YouTube praying mantis hummingbirds, like you'll see praying mantis. There's actual videos of invasive praying mantises eating hummingbirds. It's pretty crazy. So you want to identify. A lot of times you won't see them so much, but you'll see like the eggs. The egg sacs are these like crystal sacs that are attached to branches. And I'll show you. So yeah, this is this is an invasive praying mantis literally eating a hummingbird. They're pretty awful. So you want it's kind of hard to identify. I mean, you could definitely there's places you can send photos to. I'll show you a lab that you can send stuff to. But you want to try to identify that this sac. If you see this type of sac that's more lighter, whiter, kind of color, that's great. But if you see any of these other ones that kind of look more crazy like more gooey like or whatever, I don't know, these are all invasive ones, and you want to get rid of them if possible, because they're wrecking havoc on our ecosystem right now. But yeah, definitely if you see them and you're not sure, take a picture of it, and there's I'll show you a lab that you can send a photo to. Um, and then there's like different parasitic wasps. So this is great. So if you ever see like a tomato hornworm and you see these like white sacs on them, definitely leave them, because one, like I said, he's gonna. Those are actually parasitic wasps, and there's little eggs. And when they hatch, they're gonna come and basically. I can't imagine if it's got to be a horrible way to go, but basically they're going to enter into the hornworm and basically eat them from the inside out, and then fly out and start laying other eggs into other hornworms. I've heard this is literally where they got that the idea for the alien movie, where the alien burst from the person's chest. That I've heard that the rumor that came from the parasitic wasp and the tomato hornworm. And they're fantastic. I mean, they're super small wasps. I mean, they don't bother people, but they'll definitely take care of most of your worms and your cabbage loopers and things like that. So you definitely want to. These are good. If you see this, leave it for sure. Yeah, ground beetles are fantastic. They're like big black beetles, and they just devour slugs and caterpillars and cabbage loopers and things like that. So definitely to see that if you see these guys, leave them. Not to be confused with Japanese beetles that you definitely want to get rid of, but yeah, if you see like all black, kind of beetle, they're great for your garden. And you can attract them by planting like clover, and like they love white clover, and then just having rocks and stuff in your garden on the edges where they like to build shelters. And there's other things like some people, they have chickens, they let their chickens run through their gardens, and they eat all the bugs in the garden. It's awesome. And at the same time, they'll fertilize your garden, and then they'll even like till the surface with their feet. So it's yeah, if you have chickens, let them run through your garden in a bunch. It's pretty great. Then you got centipedes and millipedes are fantastic. Bug eaters, dragonflies, bats as well. Spiders, I know, like they're creepy, but they're great at, not only are they great eating a lot of pests in your garden, but they're great eating mosquitoes as well. This is one of my favorite spiders. It's a scrib spider where you can it'll actually write. It looks like they're scribing something in cursive in their web. But if you definitely leave those, or if you're freaked out about spiders, I have a friend that is just like deathly freaked out with spiders, but when she finds the spiders in her garden, I actually I'll grab them and take them in my garden, where there's like plenty of mosquitoes for them to eat. All right, so then we're going to talk about garden diseases. I'm going to kind of just fly through, not fly. I'm going to go a little quickly through this because, like I said, I'm not an expert at garden diseases, but I more just want to kind of show you some things to be aware of, and then, and then you can do, you can kind of do your own research. But one of the more common ones are powdery mildew. That looks like it's just getting like powder, like it's a fungal disease. Powdery mildew isn't I mean, it will hurt your plant a little bit, but it usually doesn't kill your plant. It's not like downy mildew, the next one we're going to talk about, that can be a lot worse. But it's definitely something. If it's a mild case, it's not a big deal. But if it's all over your plants, it could stunt it. So you may want to treat it. The best thing to do is like spray some fungicides. You can use compost tea, neem, different DIY fungicides like garlic and stuff. Will work at it. Um, and then downy mildew is definitely a little bit more harmful. Like powdery mildew is usually on the top of the leaf, and downy mildew is often on the bottom of the leaf, and it's much more darker, and it can spread a lot easier. Like it spreads through like rain and things like that. So ideally, when you see that, you want to cut those leaves out and just don't compost them, throw them in the trash, and try to just stop the spread. Is the best way to deal with it. Leaf spots, that could be a million different things. It could be bacteria, fungal issues. I'm not really aware of any leaf spots that you can't eat. Like, so if you see any on here, like on chard, I'll see a lot. It's still, or like, spinach, or, it's still good to eat. So it's not, if it gets real bad, you can just cut that leaf out, but like I said, there's a whole bunch of different reasons why that can happen, and most of them aren't going to kill the plant. Early blight. So like everyone's got early blight. So if you ever notice on your tomato leaves, you see like the bottom, stems start are turning yellow. So I mean that could be a couple different reasons, but oftentimes it's from fungal issue. Is it from a blight that's in the soil, because the bottom branches will extend down and will touch the soil, so they're usually the ones that get yellow first. That's why it's good, idea to kind of pull those off. And when you're pruning your tomato, ideally you don't want your tomato like actually, you don't want the branches actually touching the soil, because that's a way to kind of get that early blight. It's in most soils. It's like I said, it doesn't really do too much damage. I mean, you can get to the fruit and things like that. I've never seen it get past like the bottom branches of tomatoes, so not too big of a deal. I'll pull those off. Some people compost them. If you have a nice pile that gets some decent temperatures, I would. If not, I would throw them away, or else you're just going to increase the spread. Yeah, I would definitely. I would just go ahead and throw these guys in the trash. The bottom yellow branches from your tomatoes. But then late blight, that's a much more serious disease. I've never seen it in the area. I'm sure it's around somewhere, but early blight's everywhere. But late blight is definitely when you start seeing these brown parts emerge on the stalks and all over the plant, not just the bottom leaves. That's a good sign that you have late blight, and it's a pretty serious disease. It's what caused the Irish potato famine, because it affects all nightshades, and so tomatoes and potatoes are all in the nightshade family. Um, and that's one reason why we don't do monocultures, like because and things like that, because it makes us more susceptible to these kinds of outbreaks. But if you think you got the or late blight, take a photo, send it. I'll show you in a second. But there's a plant lab in the University of Maryland. You can send them photos anytime. They'll identify things. And they'll identify it. And if you confirm that it's late blight, you want to just rip that whole plant out and throw it in the trash, because if it's spread, it could spread, and it's definitely going to kill whatever it spreads to. But like I said, I've never actually seen late blight in the area. The tobacco mosaic virus. So this is one of the more beautiful viruses. But this is this is a virus that starts on tobacco plants and then actually survives the whole process of cigarettes of like being dried out and rolled into cigarettes, and then people will smoke cigarettes with it, and within that tobacco will be infected, and then they'll flick the cigarette into the garden, and then that could actually give you the virus. So that's why you want to keep smokers out of your garden, because it's a like it's a virus that starts with tobacco and ends up on your tomatoes, and then definitely kills your tomatoes. So if you see something like this happening, you can take a picture, confirm it, and if it's true, rip it out and throw it away, because it will spread to all your tomatoes, and it'll kill whatever it touches. But definitely don't want smokers in your garden. That's a good idea. If you're a smoker yourself, maybe wash your hands before you prune your tomatoes. Fusarium welts, it's a fungal issue where if you see a whole plant, one of your tomatoes just all of a sudden, starts dying and then wilting, and it's not November. I would go ahead and rip that whole thing out, because it's probably got some kind of wilts that could actually spread. So that's one. Fusarium is one of the wilts. Anthracnose. This is mainly for trees. I put it in just in case you see something like it. See like these spiral, circle stuff on the fruits, or this kind of these weird kind of like browning patterns. But it can look like a lot of other things too. So definitely take a picture and get it confirmed if you. But it can affect eggplants and peppers and nightshade stuff. It doesn't kill fruit tree. It's mainly a tree thing, and like it affects dogwoods and things like that. It doesn't really kill things often, but it's a word for a lot of different. It's like kind of an umbrella term, but um yeah, it's you're probably not going to see this one, and but definitely if you do find it, you want to cut out the infected parts, and don't compost them, throw them away. Bacterial welts. So this is like there's a lot of things that could do bacterial welts, but cucumber beetles are one of them. They have that in their stomach, and so if you have a whole cucumber plant that all of a sudden just wilts up and dies, it probably had got infected with some kind of bacterial welt. You can tell if you could by breaking the stem, and if it's got if it's gooey, if it has like bacteria slime, and it probably has that welts. And if that's the case, then if you're going to do cucumbers next year, you probably want to use pest covers, just to prevent the cucumber beetles from getting it. And then a lot of things that aren't necessarily that's going wrong with your plant isn't necessarily diseases, but more nutritional deficits, deficiencies. The first sign of a possible nutrition deficiency is chlorosis, and the chlorosis could be a lot of things. And this is where it's like how far down the rabbit hole do you really want to go? So basically, chlorosis is when you see part of your plant that's supposed to be green, and all of a sudden it turns yellow. It could be a lot of different things. Like we got a lot of frost damage from the last frost, and so that a lot of our curly kale seedlings are turning yellow. The new growth is green, so we're fine. But it could just be frost damage. It could be a number of different things. Usually, like I like to like just analyze the most common things, and then just use and if I and rule those out, and then just use a general fertilizer in case it's missing something. But some things to look for, definitely do pH tests. If you haven't tested your pH and that pH is off, that's going to be something that can cause chlorosis. Poor drainage. If you had a bunch of people walk over your garden over the weekend, and all of a sudden things getting yellow, then that might be because you compacted the soil. So maybe get a pitchfork or something and start loosening up that soil. Damage, transplant shock. If you didn't harden off your seedlings, or if you planted them the same week there was a frost, like I did, you're going to have some yellowing of the plants. Pathogens, pest issues, things like contaminations. If someone spilled a gas can, lawnmower's gas can into your garden, you may have some yellowing. So a lot of things, yeah, it depends on what Like I did have someone spill some gas once on a holly tree, and that started yellow. And I just like I just flushed it out. I watered it really heavy for a couple weeks and kind of just tried to flush it out a little bit, and that seemed to help a little bit. And then depending on what it turns yellow. If it's the bottom old leaves that are turning yellow, that's almost always a nitrogen deficiency. So if that's the case, get some liquid fish fertilizer for some really quick uptake, or just add some compost or anything to add nitrogen. If it's the top of the plants, the new growth that turns yellow, that could be an iron deficiency. I saw that we worked on the aquaponics projects once, and this is the only time I've ever seen this iron deficiency, and we actually got some chelated iron. It's like powder iron that you mix in the water, and that seemed to help a little bit. But I've never actually seen that in the actual garden though. But and then so there's so there's macro and micronutrients. Macro is that NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So those, are pretty easy. Like nitrogen is the easiest one. If it's the bottom leaves, the bottom old big leaves are turning yellow, you need some nitrogen. So add some compost, top dress it, add some fish fertilizer. If you want a quick release, or some organic, powder stuff, for a slow release. That's an easy fix. If it turns purple, never seen this, but I heard it's like phosphorus. So nitrogen, does leafy growth, vegetative growth. Phosphorus helps with blooms, helps the flowers, produces the flowers. So if you have purple, if your plant turned purple, you could use like bone meal and granite rock dust and stuff. And then if your plant, looks like the edges got burnt and it has this crazy look, it could be a potassium. And that potassium helps with the quality of the fruit, helps produce fruit and good tasting fruit. So you can use like kelp meal and things like that. Like I said, it's like you can go down a crazy rabbit hole. So usually I'll like roll out. The soil wasn't compacted, there was no contamination, and it's not a nitrogen deficiency. At that point, I usually just get I love my Neptune fish and seaweed fertilizer. It's got macro and micronutrients, and I'll just give it general fertilization. And so whatever deficiency it has, hopefully that will help. But if you're into like investigating and problem solving, I mean, definitely go for it. Try to figure out which nutrient is deficient. But there's a lot out there. So like I said, it's really up to you. But I love this because it's got a little bit of everything. The Neptune's harvest. Anyway, and then another common deficiency is a calcium deficiency. So if you ever had fruit that looks like this, suddenly has a big black, a brown rot area on the squash tips or the tomatoes, you can still eat them. They're not going to last very long. They're still going to taste good, but they're going to rot really quickly. So that's called blossom end rot. So that's a calcium deficiency. So oftentimes your soil has calcium, but something's happening that keeps it from sucking it up, and that most commonly is inconsistent watering. Like a lot of times the water will flood to you'll get really bad rain, and then you'll get and it'll be dry for a while. And so one of the best things you could do to prevent this is just a mulch, making sure you have your tomatoes and squash plants have like an inch or two of mulch, and that's to keep the soil consistent, moisture consistent, which is going to allow your roots to soak up a lot of the nutrients it needs. But if you want a real quick remedy, if you want to inject some calcium really quickly into your plant, it is put a bunch of crushed eggshells into a cup of water, let it seep overnight, and then add that straight to the soil at the base of your plant, and that's going to be like an injection of calcium. So another thing that could cause this is having using really high nitrogen fertilizers like Miracle-Gro fertilizers and stuff. That it just messes with the plant, and I don't quite understand it, but I know it can prevent it from soaking calcium up. Yeah, yeah, it does look like a bug for sure. Prevention. So this is the disease triangle where they talk where they but the idea behind this is you have pathogens, you have host plants, and then you have your environment. And the best way to deal with that is just to create a healthy environment. So the best thing to deal with, is holistic prevention approach. We already gone through this. I won't go through it again, but but I just want to kind of show this pattern by making if you don't want to go, like investigate every little thing that's wrong with your garden, just focus on making your garden like overall healthy, with good soil, good biology, good drainage, circulation, things like that, mulch. That's all things that are gonna you prevent diseases. Crop rotation as well is not just about bugs or pests, but it's also about moving around, because a lot of times, like tomato blights and things like that, will stay in the soil for a couple years. So if you plant that tomato in the same soil, it's going to get the same disease. But if you move that, if you do they say a 4 year cycle. If you move that tomato around for 4 years in a different spot, by the time it comes back to that same spot that had that disease will probably be broken down and out of the soil. So and then garden sanitation as well. When you see disease things, when you see anything that's wrong, cut it out of your plant. Remove if your whole plant's disease, remove that plant. Don't let fruit rot on the ground, things like that. So just kind of and then when you're sanitize when you're cutting disease stuff out, sanitize your pruners, put some hand sanitizer, whatever, before you start cutting a healthy plant, or that you could spread it around as well. And another thing that can help a lot with diseases is a mycorrhizae. So this is a beneficial fungus that actually will attach to your plant's roots. A lot of people use it for fruit trees and for woody plants, but also it works really well for vegetables as well. And it will attach to your plants. And what happens is it's a symbiotic relationship where your plants actually they absorb a lot of sunlight and chlorophyll and things, and they create sugars and carbohydrates and stuff, and they use some of it, but a lot of it they actually release through their roots. It's called exudates, and they release that in the roots, and it feeds all the biology. So doesn't so so mycorrhizae will attach to that. They'll feed off of those exudates, and in return, they'll be just they look like they're basically extensions of these roots, and then they'll help pull up water and nutrients, and there's a lot of not it's been a lot of studies that they kind of suggested there's some kind of I don't know if it's like intelligence or whatever, but they'll identify what is needed, what this plant is needs and is missing, or what's the deficiency is happening, and they'll find that nutrient and bring it to them. And then a lot of times in forests, the mycorrhizae will actually attach to multiple plants and will actually share and balance nutrients between multiple plants. It's another rabbit hole if you if you want to go researching mycorrhizae. It's pretty amazing stuff. But you can buy this at a garden store. You can mix it and then spray, or you can mix it into the soil. There's a lot of different ways to bring it to your soil, but it's really great. And what's great is you only have to do this once, because then it inoculates your soil, and then it should be good in your soil for a long time. And another thing to help with tomato diseases is pruning. We won't go over. I mean, we've already went over pruning steps, but the main part about pruning is, like, one, you want to get circulation in there, so it decreases fungal issues, and then you want to remove the branches that on tomato plant that's actually going to touch the ground, because then that's a vector for blights to get to and onto the plant. So definitely pruning your tomatoes will reduce your tomato diseases. And then getting things off the ground, as much as possible, what will also help with not only with avoiding, soil, diseases in your soil and blights in your soil, but also by adding circulation that's going to help with fungal issues. And then using organic fertilizers and slow release fertilizers, and avoiding the inorganic ones. That's just going to it's going to cause especially the ones that have super high nitrogen, because then your plant's just going to blow up with lots of leafy greens. It's going to overgrow the root systems. It's going to start getting unhealthy, and then it's going to attract bad pests and diseases and things. So definitely stay with a slow release organic stuff. And here's a great list of different types of things that you can use for organic fertilizers. But we went over a lot of this already. Thinning as well, not overcrowding your plants. So if you planted too many things, go ahead and thin them out and get proper spacing, so you can have circulation. That's going to help with fungal issues and reduce funguses. All right, and then treatments for different kinds of pests and or different kinds of diseases. So there are, yeah, you definitely want to. There are some harsher organic sprays. A lot of times you'll need some kind of license for this, like copper, sulfur, pyrethrin. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's still organic and but it's pretty harsh, and you definitely need to know what you're doing with that. So that's why I definitely like would prefer recommend using neem oil and things like that to kind of neem is a great fungicide, compost tea, things like that. You don't need a license. You're not going to cause harm with it. It's a much safer organic treatments. Speaking of, so compost tea is definitely one of the best things. It's a fantastic thing that you can use. Spray. So I'm actually going to show you a video on how they make compost tea. But basically, compost tea, they put it, but healthy finished compost. You don't want to use unfinished compost, but healthy finished compost, and like they put in pantyhose or a cheese cloth, soak it in water. They get like a $10 aquarium pump, to bubble it, add some organic molasses, and they just bubble it, steep it for a couple of days, and then you have to use it right away. But it's just basically this awesome probiotic. You just explode the beneficial biology into the compost, into the water, and then you can spray that in your soil. You can spray it on your leaves. It's a good fungicide. It's definitely, yeah, it's a great spray for fungicides. Sometimes, I mean, if the fungicide is really bad, it may not be that effective, but especially if you catch like powder mildew and things early, compost tea will really help out with that. But there's also other natural fungicides you can make, like garlic fungicides and horsetail. You can also buy those as well. And baking soda as well is a good fungicide. But like I said, test before you use, because I burnt some plants on doing a baking soda fungal spray once, because I accidentally put way too much baking soda, and it was pretty strong, and so I definitely recommend test spraying this before. But I'm going to play a quick video on how to actually make compost tea.
Hi, I'm Allie Reynolds with Ellie's Organics, and today I'm going to show you how to make really good compost tea. We need to have some mesh, just some fabric mesh, and some compost, of course. This is just some compost from my compost bin. And we're just going to put it in there, and I'm just going to tie it, just to hold it in there. And then I'm going to put it in a 5-gallon bucket of just plain old good clear water. Secure it in there somehow. And to this, I am going to have a regular old fish pump here with some hose and just that fish line that bubbles in your fish tank. And this is actually one that I purchased, but you could also just create one on your own, just with a circle, or you could just even have some of the little bubblers that they use in the fish aquariums. Just put that down in there. What this is going to do, it's going to percolate it so you don't have to stir it. And I also like to add some molasses in there. It really helps feed the microorganisms in there. Like 2 or 3 tablespoons is all. This is what you want to see. You want to see the bubbles in here. You want to see it percolating. You know it's working then. But if it rises to the top, then you just simply want to put a rock on it just to help hold it down. And that way you'll get more movement from the bottom up, and that's what you want to see. Compost tea is a really good way to feed plants. It's just an organic plant fertilizer. You can use this, you can pour it straight around the roots. If you want to use this tea, to squirt onto your plants, you will probably need to strain it out a little bit better. And you'll also want to dilute it. This tea will sit here and percolate for about 3 days. I want to keep a cover on it, but we don't want the cover on tight. We want to be able to have the air get in there. At the end of 3 days, we can take this out and we can use this tea. Like I said, you can just use it on just about any plant. I don't like to use it on seedlings, though, because if you get it too strong, then you have a tendency to kill them. So just stick with your outdoor growing. That's the best way to go.
All right. And then another technique that you can that's great. If you know you have some really bad, soil that's got a lot of disease in it, or has a lot of like, if the weeds are just like, too much for you and you can't keep up, you can do what's called soil solarization, which is basically you're just baking your soil using, clear plastic. Works best in the summer, but you can do it any time of the year. It just takes longer at different times of the year. Definitely want to use. I've been told, clear plastic. It gets the most sunlight. You can use like Home Depot, plastic, the painter's plastic that people use when they're to cover, their furniture when they're painting. But the idea is you want to water your soil really well, because I think there's something to that water that helps kind of bake everything, and then you cover it, whatever your garden bed or your entire area with plastic. At least 6 or 8 weeks. You can do it quicker. If it's in July, it's only going to take, a couple, 3 to 4 weeks. It depends on what year, but at least, most of the time of the year, it's like 6 or 8. A lot of people will do it like two, they'll do it like 2 months before they're ready to plant. So maybe they'll start in February and March, and they'll bake their soil, and then, or maybe March and April, and then they'll plant in, from there. And it basically just bakes things. It kills a lot of your biology, the bad biology. It will, at least the wheat seeds that are closest to the surface, it'll bake those up. The really deep wheat seeds it may not get to, but it'll definitely help with everything. The backside is it also kills all your good biology as well. But then, that you can just mix some compost and compost tea and things, when you're done, and that will bring it back to normal. But definitely, or if you just have like a small container garden, you can actually do this in your oven. It's much quicker and easier. Just kind of bake your soil in the oven. Just Google, for how long and what temperature. But Yeah, this is definitely one way to. But I would only do this if you have a real bad, if you're having really bad diseases and really bad weed issues. I would do this. I would. I don't. I mean, it's yeah. I wouldn't recommend doing this unless it's really bad. And then if you're not sure, so this is that plant diagnostic laboratory. So if you're not sure if you have like late blight or something really serious, take a photo, and you can actually, if you Google them, you can, or go to that extension URL, you can actually send them, and they'll help identify things for you. I mean, they're probably not going to identify like common pests and stuff, but they'll definitely be interested in knowing about, like, if you have like, some serious diseases and viruses and stuff, like late blight and mosaic tobacco mosaic and stuff. So they'll help you with the more serious ones. um and then the last section we're going to talk about is weeds. We're going to talk about there's a lot of weeds out there, so I'm not going to talk about all of them, but we're going to talk about just more of the common ones. So we're going to break them up into perennial weeds, which come back every year, or just stay with us every year, and then we'll talk about annual weeds that reseed themselves every year. So perennial weeds. I mean, everyone's probably seen the dandelion. It's got a pretty ferocious taproot. So you definitely need one of those. We don't need. You can if you're good, you can pull it out with your hand. But I'll show you this like tool. This like long, like knife thing that kind of, that helps, kind of pluck the long taproot. They are super nutritious. Especially if you can get them, before they bloom. It's less bitter, but it's a pretty bitter plant. But you can actually find, you can find them at Whole Foods and Yes Market, bundles of it. So it's very nutritious. You can eat the leaves. You can eat most parts of the plant as well. But it's got deep tap root. It will spread pretty quickly. And there's a lot of herbal. Yeah, there's a lot of herbal remedies that people can make out of this as well as dandelion. So if you have any herbalist friends, they'll definitely, yeah. Sometimes they'll come over and harvest your dandelion for you. But thistle. um so this is definitely something, wear some gloves when pulling these, but spiky, leaves, and then these kinds of flowers. A lot of this stuff I don't have a lot to say. I just want to kind of show you the photo, so you can hopefully, when you see it in your garden, you can be like, that's a weed, I need to pull that. Chickweed, another. I know a lot about the edible ones. So this is one of those edible ones. This one, I'm seeing a lot already of chickweed in our gardens. You can eat this, and you can make salads out of it. A lot of people make pesto out of it. It's got a bit of a grassy taste, so I'm not a huge fan, but some people really like it. but it's really nutritious. But you definitely want to pull. You want to pull the weeds out because even though it's nutritious, it's also going to be sucking nutrients away from the plants that you're trying to grow. Horse nettle is a pretty awful one. Definitely wear gloves. It's got all these, it looks like a easy plant, but then underneath it's got all these spikes on it. So, and then in the fall when all the leaves die, it has telltale sign is that has these little berries as well. So that's a great time to pull them when the leaves are gone. But definitely want to get these guys out before the thorns get too big. Everyone should know about poison ivy, even though you're probably not going to see poison ivy in your garden. Maybe I mean maybe you will, but it's just something that's good to know. I always identify poison ivy as if you look at the bottom leaves, there's always it looks like they're kind of like they're mittens, upside down mittens, and these are the thumbs right here. So there's always like a smooth surface, and then there's like a thumb right here, and a smooth surface and a thumb, and then the it's got three leaves from there. So it's a good idea to try to learn some poison ivy. It's definitely all over the city. And then a lot of times, even in winter, the leaves will be gone, but it'll still have that stuff in it uh, that yeah, they'll give you a bad reaction. So if you're pulling off vines, especially vines with red hairs, you may want to try to identify that before you pull that off because you could get poison ivy oils all over you. Pokeweed, it is poisonous, even though like if you're from DC, I guarantee you know someone that grew up on pokeweed. You can make salads out of the leaves. You can make wine out of the berries. There's different parts of the plant that are safe at times, and then other times there's various parts that have poison in them. So you got to know what you're doing with pokeweed. It's not, yeah, but yeah, the berries have a little bit of poison, and I think the roots have the most poison, and the leaves have a little bit. But if you get it at certain times, it's not poisonous. So I don't understand. I would definitely do your research if you want to try to eat it, but I would recommend just pulling it out of your garden. It will get huge. We have pokeweed in our greenhouse every year, and whenever we're not using the greenhouse, we come back and it's just like it's taken over the whole greenhouse. So and definitely want to be careful with the berries because as you're pulling it, if you smash a berry, it's going to stain your clothes. So definitely, yeah, be a little careful when you pull these things out and not to get berries all in your clothes. Nutsedge is one of the worst weeds ever. We have a bunch of it at our letterer farm. It's just such a terrible weed because it's a lot of these weeds if you get most of it out of the ground it's going to die, but certain ones that have what's called ribosomes or this like root area where if you pull like 99% of this plant out but you leave a little bit of the root left, there's going to be another nut sedge that's going to pop right up in like a couple weeks. So you have to like pull all of it out, and sometimes it's just you could spend years pulling stuff out and then waiting for it to, whatever's left to come up and pull that out, and then whatever's left, it just takes a while to really get to manage nut sedge, and it will spread like crazy. And if you have nut sedge, you definitely don't want to rototill because that's one way when you chop it up, you're just spreading it all over, and you're making like hundreds of little baby nut sedges that are gonna spread like crazy. So if you have nut sedge, don't rototill. Just broad fork until you can get the nut sedge under control. So it looks kind of like a grass. It has a triangle stem, which is one of the telltale signs. Yeah, it's a little hard to identify from most grasses, but yeah, you can sometimes you can smother them, if you sheet mulch, will work. But I'm gonna show you a video real quick of one way to get rid of it if you have a really bad problem with nut sedge. Most of the time, like I said, easiest way, you just have some, you pull it all up, try to get the whole root system. You're probably going to miss something, like especially these little tubers that actually you can eat that tastes like it has a nutty taste to it, which I guess is where they got the name nut sedge. But even those will stay, they can stay in the ground for years, and they have enough energy to just pop up whenever some random year. But yeah, a lot of times you just with most weeds you just do your best to weed it, and then you wait for it comes back and weed it again, and then usually after the third or fourth round you've gotten most of your weed seeds and things. But this one is definitely it's known in the world as one of the worst agricultural weeds. But I'm going to show you one way that this person actually got rid of their nut sedge.
man, I've been working hard to get some weeds out here. We're going to try a weeding experiment. This garden bed of mine has been weed bound with nut sedge. We call it nut grass, but the stuff's really taken over. I have heard that to kill this stuff, you have to smother it and kill it root, nut, runner, rhizome, leaves, and all. And it has to do with the way the plant grows. This is a big problem here. This is nut grass, nut sedge, and it is pervasive. It networks, as you can see, and it takes over. So in order to kill nut grass, you have to not just pull the roots, because it spreads underground by these rhizomes. It has little networks connected by a fibrous root system, as you can see, connected to these little nuts, and that's hence the name, nut grass. And these little nuts themselves can sprout whole new plants, and they're very difficult to kill. Any little bit of this plant left in your garden will continue to grow and spread, and they're incredibly difficult to get rid of. The points are incredibly sharp. They can come up through mulch, through plastic, and yeah. Now this is a quintessential nut grass root system right here. See the nut? From the nut grow these fibrous runners, and they sprout a plant. They sprout another plant. You can see as it goes, they just come up everywhere. And if you pull the weed, the nut as an anchor in the soil breaks off, and the nut stays down there. And down in this little nut here is all kinds of sugars and energy. All that energy in there. It's a sweet, sugary, starchy tuber, and all that energy in there will need to be depleted over time. You pull up all these weeds, or you smother them, they're going to grow until they deplete all of that in there. So what I'm going to do here is try to get out some of the biggest networks of nut grass by using my fork to loosen the soil and try to work these things out. Then we're going to treat with molasses, and I'll explain what I'm going to do there in a minute. So I'm going to work on some of this nut grass. And it's real hard to get this stuff out. So, it certainly looks better now. But all in here, there are still little bits and pieces of nut sedge. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a product called agricultural molasses, and it's a sugar, and I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to put it on pretty heavily, and that's going to help kickstart and turn to high gear the biology in the soil that decays matter, and hopefully that will help decay what root matter is still down there. Because these nut sedges, I've heard, can come back a dozen times with the energy they store underground. Well, if we can destroy that energy underground by natural processes, then maybe we can get rid of these weeds. So I'm going to put the molasses down, and then I'm going to cover the whole bed except for the beans that are growing in there. Hopefully they can make it through this. But if we lose the whole bed this year, that's okay to get rid of this nut grass. I'm going to cover it with cardboard, a heavy layer of cardboard to keep the light out. And cardboard is this nut sedge can go through most garden, what do you call that stuff? That fabric, that mulching fabric, that garden fabric. They can get through most of that stuff, but they can't get through cardboard because it's not porous, and it's fine enough where they can't poke through it. So I'm going to lay down the cardboard to help smother this all the way through the heat of the summer. And I'm going to cover that cardboard with some Bermuda grass hay as mulch, just so it'll look decent. All right, so we've put down our cardboard now. We're going to wet it just to get it nice and floppy. And then we're going to cover it with our mulch. I've covered up some of the edges, hoping that we can suppress weeds there as well. Yeah, soak that real good.
All right, so that he actually does a second video where he comes back. I think it's like a month later, and he goes through the whole garden and it completely, all the little the nuts and everything is basically like the the agricultural molasses, creates, feeds the bacteria and biology that just basically eats everything, and it's completely nut sedge free with this. So it does work. I wouldn't do this unless you have a real bad nut sedge problem, but definitely it's one way to kind of get rid of your nut sedge. And there was a question: can you eat the nuts? You could definitely, yeah, you can eat the nuts. I don't know how they taste. I saw another YouTube video where someone ate it and said it was nutty, tasted nut like, but yeah, definitely. I have a nut. We have enough nut sedge at later. I'll try one out this year. All right, so annual cool weather weeds. So these are the weeds that are going to be coming up right about now that kind of reseed themselves every year. One of the more beautiful ones are dead nettle. So if you ever see like a whole field of purple, that's dead nettle. It's pretty easy to pull. It's not you can eat dead nettle. It's not as stinging nettle is the one that everyone makes like herbal tinctures, and it's really healthy for you. But this one, you can tell it's in the mint family, so you can one tell that you can tell it's got a square stem. So anything that's got a square stem is it's in the mint family, and nettle is definitely in the mint family. So wild mustard, which is edible itself. The younger leaves are better. It gets a little, yeah, it starts getting not so edible as the leaves get bigger, but definitely keep an eye out for that. Wood sorrel, it's not too bad of a weed. I always keep a little bit in my garden because it's got this really great sour taste to it. It's great if you're really thirsty in the hot summer to kind of suck on one or put it in your water and make it a little bit of a sour water. You don't want to eat too much of it. Like I wouldn't eat a whole salad of it because it's got a lot of that oxalic acid, so it can definitely mess up your stomach a little bit. But definitely love wood sorrel. Ground ivy, you'll see a lot of this. Again, square stem, and it's pretty easy to pull. Bittercress, pretty easy to identify. Oftentimes has a pretty hardy tap root, so make sure you get all of that out. Then warm weather stuff that you'll see, it's definitely in May and June. Prickly lettuce is one you'll see this all over your garden. Definitely make sure you get the whole root system out. Pretty easy to pull though. Lamb's quarters. So this is another great edible one. It tastes kind of like spinach. It's super nutritious. It's one of the more nutritious plants that your garden will grow. It's way more nutritious than anything you're actually intending to grow, but it will take over, and it does sap nutrients from your other crops. So like I said, I like to keep a little bit of it grow in my garden and harvest it. The younger the plant, the better it tastes. But if it takes over, it definitely I would recommend removing it. Morning glory. So you go to any garden store and you'll see them selling morning glories. I don't know why. I mean, it's a beautiful plant. I had some in one of my houses a long time ago, and it blooms in the morning. So every time I left for work, it was blooming. It's really beautiful, but it's also really invasive, and it's really hard to get rid of, and it will spread like crazy. And it's just like, yeah, don't buy or plant morning glory. It's a lot to deal with. Yeah, not the morning glory for sure. Yeah, it's a big it's very invasive, so definitely pull that stuff out. It's morning glories in the bindweed family. So all the bindweeds, any kind of weed that has kind of a triangle, or any kind of vine that has a triangle leaf, or very or heart shaped, usually not good. Lori asked, moonflower too. I don't know moonflower. I'm not really sure if that's invasive or not. Bermuda grass is a tough one. So this is very similar to nut sedge, where you need to pull all the roots out, and it spreads with these lateral roots called rhizomes. Definitely something that if you have real bad Bermuda grass, I would recommend just sheet mulching it and just smother it for several months. But usually you'll be able to pull most of this stuff yourself. Purslane. So I'm actually I seeded up purslane this year. Even though it is a weed, I don't feel like it takes over too much. I feel like it's very manageable, um, and it's very nutritious. It has the highest omega fatty acid content of any plant that I've ever seen. It's so if you're looking for omega fatty acids, this is a fantastic plant. It's like a succulent. You would eat the leaves, but it's not like an aloe, like kind of slimy succulent. It's like it's much more milder. I mean, it's great to like mix in a salad. Yeah, I don't. I leave my purslane. It's pretty great. Crabgrass, definitely. Yeah, want to make sure you get all the roots on this guy. Broad and narrow leaf plantain. So these are not like the fruit plantains. But it definitely want to pull these because they'll spread like crazy. But one cool thing about this, we used to do pre-pandemic, we would do herbal walks with different herbalists, and they tell us all the different things you could do in the garden. And I always forget most of them, but this one I always remember because it's this is the coolest one, and it works really well. So basically, if you make a spit, I think it's called a potus or something. It's very, if you take one of these leaves, make sure it's not a leaf that like a dog is pet, is like use the bathroom on or anything like that. You want to, make sure it's in an area where pets aren't around. But you take a leaf and you chew it up in your mouth, and if you get a mosquito bite, you actually put it on as a salve onto the mosquito bite, and it just takes the itch away right away. It's so cool. So you don't want to eat it though, but it can definitely use it as like a spit salve or whatever. Devil's weed. This one's really poisonous. You want to get this one out. It kind of looks like an eggplant. The first couple times I saw it, I thought it was like a volunteer eggplant, but but then you once it starts developing these spiky balls and weird, like the cone shaped flowers as well. Once you identify this, you want to remove it because it's pretty poisonous. You're not going to probably eat it, but pets and stuff maybe, but it's just good to get out. Garden ragweed as well. Get that out, especially before it starts shooting. It's pollen in the air, and then here's a list of all the edible weeds in your garden that are super nutritious and pretty. Some of them are pretty delicious. Some of them, yeah, it's preference, but. And then prevention for weeds. So a lot of different ways to prevent. One way I like if you have the time is to kind of till your garden, like weed it and till it and get it, ready for the to plant, but don't actually plant. So when you till, when you mix up your soil, there's a lot of seeds that are in the soil that you're exposing that are going to pop up. So you want to do that and then just like let it sit for a couple weeks, and then the weeds are going to come up, and then you come back and then weed it again, and then plant your seedlings. That's one way to kind of get a head start on your weeds and get like the first couple rounds out of the way. And then or if you're planting early, like if you're planting in like April 1st, and your weed seeds aren't coming up again, you can actually warm up your soil a little bit with some plastic for like a week, and then wait till the weed seeds start popping up, and then pull that plastic off and weed everything. So that's one way if you're on top of your game. Another one's mulching. They won't 100%, suppress weeds, but it does like suppress some weeds for sure. So we talked a lot about mulching, but yeah, using like 2 to 3 inches straw, shredded bark, even like living mulch like white clover as well. Works really well to keep weed seeds from establishing themselves. And then if you you have real bad weed problems, or you just don't have no time to deal with weed problems, definitely think about garden covers. I really prefer the woven kind fabric, where you can make a jig out of, with a hole saw and plywood, and then burn holes into based on what measurements what you're planting, and then planting those holes, and then you'll still have to occasionally weed, some weeds in the holes, but then it like reduces the amount of weeding by like 90%. It's pretty amazing. Unwoven is pretty crazy. It gets landscape fabric. It gets the roots grow into it, and then it's impossible to rip up. And then you can use like different kinds of biodegradable plastic mulches as well. Cover crops is also another great way. If you know you're not going to use the soil, and you don't want to leave this. If you know you're not going to use like a couple beds, let's say you're planting a spring bed, but then you have a couple beds that are just going to sit there for a while, or you're not going to use them this year or whatever. You don't want to just leave the soil exposed. You can either like buy some mulch and cover it with mulch. Or a really great, especially in the summer, cover crop is buckwheat. So this is buckwheat. So if you know you got some beds that you're not going to use for a while, in the summer, you can buy some cheap buckwheat. You just seed it, broadcast it all and seed it and scrape it and scuffle it up with a hard rake and seed it, water it really well until it starts growing. And then it's going to take over the whole plot, and it grows super quick and it's super aggressive, and it's going to crowd out any kind of weed. So at the same time, it's really beneficial for attracting pollinators and beneficial insects like ladybugs love it. So it's a great, so if let's say you have this huge garden and you're not going to use all of it, well, plant half of it with buckwheat, and then that's going to, attract all kinds of great, bugs and pollinators and things, and keep the weeds out. So planting and tilling, we've gone through a lot of this already. And then treatment. So the best thing to do, especially if you have a small garden, is just weed it. Try to weed it, once a week, as much as you can. And then as the new weeds come up, you weed those, and eventually, you're going to run through all the seeds in the soil. So, and then you just got to get ahead of the weeds. But I mean, there's going to be other weeds. It's kind of tough on the community gardens because you can do a great job with your garden, but then there's someone that's not taking care of their garden, and then all of a sudden weed seed, they let their weeds go to seed and just shoots the seeds all, thousands of seeds all over the garden. So that's the biggest thing is you want to make sure you don't let these weeds go to seed. Because a lot of these weeds will just shoot thousands of seeds into the air, and then there are going to be thousands of new weeds over the next couple of years, and those weed seeds can stay in the soil for a really long time. So definitely don't let them go to seed. Weed, a couple rounds of weeding, you'll get you'll get on top of your weeds, if you could spend that time. But you can also do different, smothering, solarization, sheet mulching, all different kinds of things. The main thing is you want to find, there's a lot of different weeders out there, or tools to weed. This is a great one for tap roots. Like you have dandelion weeders. Scuffle hoes are really great if you have a long rose. It's got a blade on all three sides, and then you just kind of just scuffle it back and forth, and it just cuts all the weeds. You have a stirrup hoe, so you can actually it'll cut the weeds at the base, and you can put it on the wheel hoe. There's lots of great hand weeders and things like that. So you just kind of have to figure out your style and what works best. Ideally, you want to, ergonomically speaking, like you want to be in this position as much as possible if you want to save your back. We used to do a class with this farm that's not around anymore, where we would go out and try out all their tools, and they'd find, and people could find the tools that fit best. But long handle weeders are fantastic if you have a big area. If you have a raised bed, it's okay to kind of it's not going to be a big deal to do some hand weeding. But if you have a pretty big area, definitely want to get long tools to save your back. And this is a great this is a list of great suppliers to find any kind of weeder tools out there. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is flame weeding. Instead of talking about it, I'm just going to show you a video. I haven't done this yet, but I'm definitely going to try to do this year.
I'm Dave Epstein. This is Growing Wisdom. I'm here today with Anthony Stevenson at Johnny Selected Seeds, and you've got propane on your back and a lighter and this flamethrower. What are you doing?
Dave, this is called a backpack flame weeder, and it's an organic, labor-saving way to weed your garden without using harmful herbicides.
That's awesome. Anthony, it's fairly warm out here working in the garden. How much does this thing weigh?
Empty, Dave, it weighs 22 pounds. With a full tank on your back, it's 34.
Obviously, the weeds can't live in the heat, but how does it work?
Dave, you turn the tank on, and then there's a little valve here that you turn on. Strike it out the flint, and then really, you You just pull this trigger right here, and you walk them down the rows. Do you want me to give you a demonstration?
Anthony, I'd like to see the demo, but I'm going to step aside just in case. Not that anything's going to happen. Come back every week for all of our tips, hints, and helps here at Growing Wisdom, and we're going to watch Anthony kill some weeds.
The procedure is to move down the row at a slow walk. It is not necessary to burn the weeds. The flame only needs to overheat the tissues to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. They will have a glassy look and will wilt in a few hours. Be careful when weeding close to plastic mulch as not to melt or burn the mulch. You should tend to plant the crops for flame weeding slightly deeper than usual, so that you have more leeway from germination to seedling emergence. It is better to flame a little early than too late. If you are one day too late and the seedlings have emerged, the flame weeding will kill them as well as the weeds. Steam is an indicator of spending too much time on a given area.
Right, and I know that looks crazy, but it's actually like you can buy these flame weeders for some of them are like $30-$40, and you don't need to have you can have a giant propane backpack as well. You can get ones with small tanks, and I've talked to a lot of people who love these because well, yeah, not only it gets rid of the weeds, it gets rid of them quickly. You don't have to pull them. You can it's easy to kind of like a guy was talking about, you can actually germinate, you can plant seeds and then burn, and then those seeds will still germinate if you do it right. So it's pretty nice. Like I said, I've never really tried it. I'm going to try it out this year and see how it goes. But cool. And that's the class. So we ended a little early, but I'll stick around for a while if anyone has any questions or comments, and if not, I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Josh. Great class.
Thanks, Ronnie.
All right. See you soon. I'll figure out some volunteer time real soon.
Cool.
All right. Take care, everybody. See y'all soon.
Good night. You
Night.
are so bomb, Josh. Thank you so much. I so enjoy these classes.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you all so much. I'll see you soon. Take care.